The tampon king gets back in the ring. I speak of former VP nominee Tim Walz. He joined Beto O'Rourke at a Texas town hall last night, and the estrogen levels were enough to give Chuck Norris menstrual cramps.
But I think that, but I can't get past the core fact about Walz, which is he presided over, allowed the biggest city in the state to get burned down.
And seemed to not only allow it, but kind of
liked it.
Support it, you know?
Well, yeah, did you see the video of his wife saying, I kept the windows open so I could smell the burning rubber from the riots?
I did not see that.
Wow. The wife whose hand he shook.
Oh my God. By the way, I mean, I know it's picking on a little thing, but who the hell...
What does it really say about a man when he greets his wife of 3 decades with a stiff, corporate-style handshake on a public stage? That uncomfortable moment involving Minnesota Governor Tim Walz exploded online, and for many people, it felt like more than just awkward timing. Walz sells the Minnesota nice persona like it's his entire brand: soft-spoken, calm, harmless to a fault. His image is built on being the safest guy in the room, projecting steady reassurance without ever rocking the boat. But once commentators like Gutfeld and Tucker Carlson started pulling at that image, cracks began to show. What emerged wasn't a confident leader in control. It looked more like a man overseeing chaos while hiding behind a rehearsed grin. That handshake didn't feel accidental. It felt revealing. In a political world obsessed with warm hugs and staged affection, Walz came off distant and mechanical. Less quirky habit, more system error, like the mask slipped for just a second.
Lingers on candidates' fingers and defend Waltz's wide eyes as they claim beards are for bad guys. Tyler, speaking of beards, and I mean the one on your face, not the one that you hang out with.
Let me just say that Walz and every other governor who did anything like that is a monster, and I think on some level he will be punished for it. But no, I admire what you did enough that I hope I'd be man enough to do it myself. I took minor risks during COVID by pointing out things that seemed true to me, but I didn't do anything that heroic. I think it's absolutely essential. Clearly, we're moving toward an authoritarian state. I think we've already arrived. I think your life is a testament to that.
Wait, you lost because you weren't woke enough? That's like telling Joy Behar she's not eating enough Doritos. That's like Jasmine Crockett saying, I gotta black this up. That's like Bud Light saying, hey, you know what? We could use more Dylan Mulvaney.
That polished, friendly image didn't just crack in 2020. It shattered completely when Minneapolis went up in flames. This was Governor Tim Walz's moment of truth, and critics say he failed it spectacularly. 4 days, the city burned. Police precincts were abandoned. Entire neighborhoods were reduced to rubble. The scenes felt unreal, like footage from a failed state. And yet, Walz's response looked slow, passive, and strangely detached. Gutfeld argued it wasn't just incompetence. He suggested Walz practically tolerated the destruction, maybe even quietly encouraged it. That accusation stuck, especially after reports surfaced of Walz's wife allegedly saying she left the windows open to smell the burning. Joke or not, the optics were brutal. 2 powerful people safe at home while a city unraveled. And the damage didn't stop when the fires did. Minneapolis reportedly lost nearly 40% of its police force afterward, as officers fled a city where leadership felt hostile instead of supportive. Critics say this wasn't just a riot. It was the moment public safety started falling apart under a governor more focused on ideological applause than protecting real people.
So Trump is making it more difficult for women to vote? How so? Math problems? But it's further proof that the most dangerous thing for a leftist is a follow-up question, which is why you never hear any. But I guess questioning elections is okay now. But the best moment came when Walz forgot who he is.
Sort of with picking up on just these little lies he would tell. He never was a command sergeant major, despite the fact him, saying that he was. He never attained this rank in the military. Instead, he abandoned his troops and they were deployed to Iraq without him, and he ran for Congress. So I've always felt as a reporter, if someone lies about little things, they're lying about big big things.
That's a principle that stands the test of time.
And Minnesota has become, the home of this defund the police movement. It was on the ballot. Minneapolis did not vote to defund the police, but I would say in every way, shape, or form, they defunded the police. You have the Minneapolis Police Department that's lost about 40% of their cops since George Floyd. But instead of being
Minneapolis lost 40% of its cops in 5 years?
As Minneapolis was still smoking, critics say a second disaster was already unfolding, this time aimed directly at Minnesota's economy. Under Tim Walz's pandemic leadership, small businesses faced what many described as ruthless, top-down control. According to Greg Gutfeld, Walz didn't govern like a steady leader. He acted like a mob boss collecting dues and crushing dissent. Mom-and-pop shops were shut down without mercy. One widely shared story involved a grandmother who reopened her small business in peaceful protest, only to be thrown in jail. Her crime? Trying to survive. Meanwhile, massive corporate chains stayed open without interruption. Churches were closed, but liquor stores were magically declared essential. Critics called the double standard outrageous. Tucker Carlson framed it as a kind of technocratic authoritarianism, where citizens were told what to fear, when to move, and how to live. In that telling, it wasn't about public health. It was about control, treating adults like children while destroying livelihoods with smug certainty.
I'm the law-abiding grandma that was sentenced to 90 days in jail for opening my business during the shutdowns as a peaceful protest when Minnesota Governor Tim Walz unconstitutionally and illegally shut our businesses down. So my question is, if you were in my situation, would you have done the same thing? Or what would you have done?
Well, I flatter myself by imagining I would have done the same thing, because I think what you did is honorable and necessary.
Dude, you're an old white guy. And you're right, you are a huge disappointment. I guess hating himself is the first thing he's nailed correctly. Because Walz saying old white men suck isn't a political stance, it's his confession. Walz calling people old and white is like Maxine Waters making fun of someone for shopping at Wigs R Us.
The criticism of Tim Walz doesn't stop with his time as governor. It reaches back to the very foundation of his public image. For years, Walz was introduced as a command sergeant major, one of the most respected enlisted ranks in the military. That title carries serious weight. Leadership, authority, trust. It became a central pillar of his brand. But critics say the story doesn't match the records. While Walz served 24 years in the National Guard, questions remain about whether he ever actually achieved that rank. To his critics, this wasn't a harmless mix-up, it was presented as fact. The doubts deepen further. Walz reportedly left his unit to run for Congress shortly before it deployed to Iraq. Critics argue that decision looked like ambition beating duty. Tucker Carlson framed it bluntly. If someone is willing to stretch the truth about their own story, why trust them with bigger ones? In this critique, the rank issue isn't just a detail, it's a warning sign.
This summer, George Floyd, a convicted felon, OD'd on fentanyl outside a convenience store in Minneapolis, and the country changed forever. 5 years later, Tim Walz is still the governor. Keith Ellison is still the attorney general. The cops who were falsely convicted of murdering George Floyd are mostly still in prison. But what happened in Minneapolis itself? Well, it's been wrecked. And no one has said a word about it. But I just wonder about this story in particular. Did he have contact with Walz? Do we know that Walz ever, has Walz said, I met this guy ever?
Well, this is what's interesting. We know that he served on a board appointed by Walz. However, I'll say that...
what kind of board was it?
It was a workforce development board.
Critics say the harshest consequences of Tim Walz's leadership landed where it hurts most, on kids. While his administration pushed equity as the top priority, Minnesota classrooms reportedly slid into crisis. Reading and math scores fell, while ideology took center stage over achievement. Greg Gutfeld summed it up with brutal humor, joking that under Walz, 2 + 2 equals whatever won't offend anyone. Funny line, but the accusation is serious. Critics argue schools became laboratories for progressive social experiments, with students paying the price. Standards dropped. Expectations softened. Excellence became optional. Then there's a deeply unsettling personal detail critics point to. Walz and his wife were reportedly married on the anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre. Out of all possible dates, they chose one tied to state violence against its own people. And according to critics, it didn't end there. Their honeymoon was allegedly spent in China. To detractors, the symbolism is disturbing, the judgment questionable, and the optics impossible to ignore.
Tim's odd greeting, the man of the hour. Tim Walz brings us our second video of the day, and he's got a very weird way of greeting his wife of 30 years. Roll it.
And he picked that date because it was a date that they would remember, he and his wife.
What?
Who does that?
Tiananmen Square?
Correct.
The tank crushing the lone protester? That's
their wedding anniversary. And they went to China for their honeymoon.
Come on. You're sure he picked the anniversary?
They've talked about this
in Tiananmen Square
interviews. Yeah, this is in newspapers.
But Tiananmen Square was a massacre of peaceful protesters.
I know.
Do you think they picked it to in the memory of those brave souls who died opposing the machine?
They haven't said that.
This slow-motion disaster of a governorship became irresistible bait for a two-man demolition team, each attacking from a different angle. Greg Gutfeld brought the humor. Tucker Carlson brought the scalpel. Gutfeld played the comedic executioner, unloading punchlines with surgical timing. He mocked Walz's awkward attempts at self-awareness, especially when Walz called himself a disappointment as an old white guy. Gutfeld quipped it was the first thing Walz had gotten right. Carlson followed with a calm, methodical teardown. No shouting. No theatrics. Just a quiet dismantling of Walz's record. He didn't portray Walz as evil, he framed him as something worse, a smiling bureaucrat enforcing bad ideas with total obedience. In Carlson's telling, Walz represents the rise of the soft authoritarian, the hall monitor with power.
One of them, Politico says, is Walz's wide eyes showed his passion and emotional intensity. Can we show that? There is his wide eyes. That humans would widen their eyes to convey that danger is close. What emotion are you getting from that? Sorry.
Beyond culture wars, critics argue Tim Walz pushed Minnesota's economy to the brink. Taxes rose. Regulations piled up. Businesses fled like they smelled smoke. To critics, the state became openly hostile to growth. His aggressive green energy push symbolized everything they hated about his leadership. Big promises, shaky execution. They argue unreliable energy plans strained the power grid while everyday Minnesotans paid higher costs. Sustainability was the slogan. Instability was the result. And when problems surfaced, critics say Walz pointed fingers instead of fixing them. In the end, this critique isn't framed as just a political hit, it's a case study in modern leadership failure. Gutfeld brought the jokes. Carlson delivered the indictment. And Walz, according to critics, supplied endless material. Not remembered as the man who guided Minnesota through crisis, but as the leader who showed up to his own roast and still couldn't escape the flames.